Hello, I'm going to share my screen and begin a little bit of the presentation that I'm submitting for the Humanities Washington. Thank you for your consideration. My name is Karen Triger. Want to make sure that it works. Okay, great. Um, Hi, my name is Karen Triger, and I am presenting today In Search of Self, Family Research and Storytelling as a Portal into Your City and Your Soul. Pericles, who was a philosopher who lived a long time ago, said, "What you leave behind is not what is engraved in." Sorry, I'm just going to turn on my timer so I can stop. Pericles, who was a philosopher who lived a long time ago, said, "What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others." Today, I'm hoping to take this idea of what is woven into the lives of others and see how it affects each of us, and to try to take that and weave into our own selves and our own lives some of what came before us. I want to ask a few questions. Raise your hand if you can name all four of your grandparents. Raise your hands if you know the city your grandparents were born in. How many of you know the type of work your grandparents did? Can any of you name any great-grandparents? I found these questions to be really interesting. I found them in an ancestry.com survey that was done. And these are just some samplings. There were a lot more questions, but just what I want to share this morning to begin our thought process is that 84% of the people, the respondents to that survey, said that it's important to know about their heritage. However, 34% couldn't trace their family tree past their grandparents. 33 couldn't name all four of their grandparents. 21% didn't know which city any of their grandparents were born in. 20% were unable to name any great-grandparents. And 14% didn't know what any grandparents did for work. I thought that was really fascinating, and made me, of course, ask myself to make sure that I knew all the answers to those questions, which I do. But I might not have known all the answers to those questions before I began my research into my family. I've been on this journey of family research for many years now. First for my husband's side of the family, who were Holocaust survivors, and then switching to my family, which is a story of Jewish immigration in the late 1800s and early 1900s to the United States. What I hope to do today is to inspire you, though, to inspire you to learn your stories from the past and be willing to tell them and pass them on to the future. It might sound like a cliche, but I actually really see myself as a link in this long chain. Like, I look behind me and I see a long line of ancestors that came before me that led to me being alive today in the world in 2025. And then I look at my children and my grandchildren, so happy to have grandchildren, and I see the future going beyond me, even after I'm gone, because none of us are going to live forever, friends. So when I'm gone, there's a future of and it's my responsibility to know the stories. I feel my responsibility to know the stories in my family and pass them along to my children and grandchildren, and then in the hopes that they'll care enough to pass it on even further. For me, knowing this information really grounds me in space and time in this moment, and I have a much deeper sense of who I am and kind of why maybe I'm on the planet right now. And so it's a very inspiring thing to do, to look into the past and learn about your ancestors and see how their lives affected you today. I'm going to use the stories of my 5 families that I've been doing this research on, publishing a book in August that's going to come out with all the research that I did and the storytelling that I'm doing. But I'm going to use my experience and my family stories to take you on a step-by-step approach. There's 9 steps that we're going to go through, from how to begin to how to have something at the end that you can really be proud of, that you can share with your kids or grandkids or friends, and can be, your end product can be in many different forms, very formal or very informal. But before we begin, what I'd like to do before I begin with step 1, I would like you to turn to someone you're sitting next to, preferably someone that you don't know, you didn't come here with today, and introduce yourself. And I want each of you to take just 2 minutes to share with that person something about your family past, about your family story, and maybe a little bit about what you hope to get out of this presentation today. And I'll time it for 2 minutes, and then I'll ask you to switch to the other partner, and then we'll come back and begin with step 1. So let's all come back together, and I hope that was fun and informative, and give you a sense of what it is you're hoping to gain today. Step 1, though, is maybe the hardest step of all, which is to decide to do it and think about why it's important to you, to me, to you. Why is it important to know something more about your ancestors? Because, like, who cares? Like, I'm alive today. Like, it doesn't really matter who came before me or what their stories are. But if it's important to you to know those stories because you want to have a better sense of your own self, and you want to pass some of that sense of history on to the future, there's many reasons why it can be important to you. It was important to me, so I began. And step 2 is really just start in with the opening research, and what you can do just to begin. Like, what do you know? What do you want to know? You can sketch a family tree. Just take a piece of paper, and we're actually going to do this in just a moment, and just write down, like, see how far you can go. Just scribble it on a, like on the back of a napkin, but we'll use actually a piece of paper, and see how far you can go. Then another thing to start out is to write a list of people that you'd like to interview. And these are people who are alive. So, like, I wanted to interview my mom and my aunt and my cousins, and people who knew my dad, because my dad had already died when I started this project. And that was part of it for me. A big part of it was, like, my dad was dead, and I missed him so badly, and I just wanted to understand why he had saved a file worth of stuff, because he was going to do some family history research, and then he died before he had the chance. So I was like, what did he save, and why did he save it? Why was that important to him? And that got me started on a huge journey that led me to be here today, honestly. But so the other thing you can do is write a list of questions you wish you could ask your ancestors who aren't alive anymore, because that can kind of guide you. And it's like, what do I want to know? What do I wish I had someone to ask? And then Google searching just names, places, and just to get a sense of timeline of a history. One of the things I did early on is get a timeline history of the city of Seattle, just to get a sense of, like, back to like 1850s when Seattle started as a city. And that was all really, really informative. So let's take just a few minutes, and everybody has a piece of paper and a pen in front of them. Go ahead and try to sketch out your family tree. We'll take 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll come back together. See what you can do. Okay, let's pull it back together. And step 3, after you've done sort of that initial assessment of what you know and what kind of you'd like to know, a little bit of what you'd like to know, is you can begin to fill in some of the blanks. And there's the library is an amazing resource. One of the first things that I did was just went to the Seattle City Library website, and there's a search bar. And in that search bar, I just put in my earliest Seattle ancestor's name, Paul Singerman. I think I just even put in Singerman, and I got the most amazing result. I got one result. That was like amazing. One result, which was a manuscript about the history of Toklas and Singerman retail department stores. And this was something written in 1930s. It's a one of a kind. I had to go to the library and have the librarian unlock it and hand it to me like a jewel. And I had got to sit down. I couldn't take it out of the library, but I could sit down and read it, and I could make copies of it. And it was an entire history of my great great grandfather coming to Seattle, actually coming to America, then coming to San Francisco, and then coming to Seattle, and all the 11 stores that he owned and operated here between 1874 and when he died in 1915. That was a remarkable find. And I got it just by putting his name into the library search bar. Amazing. Librarians are also terrific resources. Seattle Library, I don't know about other libraries in different cities, but probably they have genealogy librarians who, for free, will sit down with you. You can make an appointment, and they'll help you think about how to search back some of your ancestors. I started reading books about Seattle, books about immigration of Jewish immigration from Eastern Europe, and trying to look into the cities where my family members were from. Now, the old files and boxes in your house, maybe in your parents' house, maybe in your grandparents' house, those are treasure troves also. Photos, old diaries, old letters, old documents, and newspaper articles. Just, you'd be surprised what people decide to save and what you now have access to. You get to see not only what was important to that person who saved those things, but it opens up such a portal into the past. Sometimes court records can be very helpful. I found out a lot of information about my great aunt, her divorce in 1917. That was very interesting. So these are some resources to help begin to fill in the blank spaces. Step 4 is that you can look at websites. In today's world, with our computers and with our fingers, we can search so much information. I've listed a number of websites here. Ancestry is free at the library, Seattle Public Library anyway. I don't know about other cities. Family Search, which is the Mormons have this huge database of genealogy information. Genealogy Bank is, it's a commercial enterprise. You have to pay for that. But for me, that was really well worth it because it was so easy to use and gave me so much good stuff. There's newspapers. If you're Jewish, there's Jewish Gen, which has amazing amount of information about the towns that some of our ancestors might have come from, universities, museums, so many websites to go through and poke around in and see what you can find. For example, this U.S. Census report from 1920 in Seattle is my paternal grandmother was a Steinberg, and she came to America with her whole family in 1911. They came across the Atlantic and ended up in Montreal, and then taking the train and then down to Seattle because they had a relative here already. And so I found this census report, and it's hard to read. You can, when you have it on a screen, you can make it bigger. But I just wanted to show you kind of what it looks like. And even though you can't really see it, you can see here it says Steinberg, H, Hyman, H is for Hyman, which was the English name my great grandfather took. And Anna is below it, which is the English name that my great grandmother took on in America. And then the kids, you've got Sam and Reuben, Goldie, and Rose. Here is Rose. Rose is my beloved dear grandmother, my dad's mom, who was so important in my life. And so to see her here in the 1920 census in Seattle, living in her family home, and these give you so much information. It's how old, what's their age, what is their profession, if they have it, or if they're a student, where they come from, do they speak English? What language do they speak in the home? Do they read and write English? And it's like, it's just an amazing wealth of information in these one little tiny line that you can find here. So I did this, I found census reports from all my ancestors in different times, and it was interesting to see the changes over time as well. So it's really fascinating. Photos and letters are really critical to, first of all, making this really, really fun for you, for me. It made it really fun to find these amazing old photos. Some of them I found in the basement of my parents' house. Some I found in the basement of my cousin's house. Some I found online at the University of Washington, Mohi, newspapers. For me, in my synagogue, my parents' synagogue journals, these old journals, I found some great photos, but maybe it's your church or your mosque or whatever religious organization your family has in their life. You can also take your own photos. I took a lot of my own photos, and that's also been very fun on my journey. I'm going to give you some examples. This picture of Paul Singerman, who was, again, the first ancestor that in my family that came to Seattle. He came in 1874, and he's the one who opened up all those retail stores, Toklas and Singerman, that I found that manuscript about, that treasure trove manuscript. Our family, no one has a picture of him in their basement, but I found this picture of him in 1903 in a Seattle Times article. And even though like the quality isn't so great, it's grainy and kind of yucky because it's from an old newspaper archive, but still, there he is. There's Paul Singerman. That's what he looked like. And sadly, I couldn't find in any archive a picture of his wife, Jenny Singerman. So I do not know what she looks like. But such is life. You're not going to find everybody, but the ones you find, the ones that I have found, I'm extremely grateful for. Here is a picture from the University of Washington archive that shows, so Paul Singerman's store, his early stores were called the San Francisco store because he had partners in San Francisco, and he came to Seattle from there and opened up some retail stores. And this store was in 1877, and it was down on First Avenue where everything was at the time. But it gives you such a sense. This is just south of Yesler, if you know Seattle, and you can see what the stores look like. Of course, they're all wooden. This was before the Great Fire of Seattle, which was 1889. But you can also see it's dirt streets with elevated wood sidewalks, and you see next to his store, he was he had like a department store with all kinds of clothing for miners, which was a really big deal even before the huge gold rush in the Alaskan gold rush. There was a lot of mining going on in this area for gold, different rivers where they found gold. And they also had stuff for your home and other kinds of clothing. It was a department store, basically, a very small scale department store. But next to there, you can see there's a furniture store, and you can see on the other side, there's groceries, hardware, wines, liquor, cigars, and just look at how people are dressed. It's what a portal into the past this picture is. And I learned a lot about what the city of Seattle was in the 1870s by just looking at this picture. And then there were other pictures that I was able to find that told a story of a moment. And this is still related to the San Francisco store. This was the huge snowstorm in 1880 that fell in Seattle, and everything shut down. I mean, they didn't have plows. Not that we have plows now, very many plows in Seattle, but they didn't have plows then. And there was this huge snowstorm, and everything shut down. And you can see here, this is the same store that I just showed you before, the San Francisco store. But it was right at this time in January of 1880 that Paul Singerman was attempting to move his store across the street to this beautiful building over here on the right side, which is a brand new Squire Opera House building, just been built. And it was this new gorgeous theater that was built in Seattle. So it also tells you what's going on in Seattle in the 1880s. You know, these ideas of grandeur, that we were going to have this huge city with great opera and theater. But he was going to open his store right on the first floor of this building, but he got stymied because of the snowstorm, and because there were no tow trucks, there were no trucks. They were used horses at this time, horses and wagons. They couldn't move, but then he ended up getting sick of waiting, and he hired people to make a path through the snow, and they carried all the merchandise across the street. But then I found this other store, which the snow is now gone. This other picture, the snow is gone, and you can see the same exact sign, San Francisco store, but now it's attached to the building on the right side of this picture, and which is the Squire Opera House. So he moved from the west side of the street. Again, this is First Avenue. In those days, it was called Commercial. The west side of the street to the east side of the street, but the snowstorm got in the way of the move on the date that he wanted to do it. And he was like, by hook or crook, I'm moving into this new space. And he did it. And then the snow melted. We went back to business, but his business was now moved to the other side of the street. And those two pictures really, for me, are a snapshot in time that tell not only about the tenacity of my great grandfather, Paul Singerman, but also about the history of Seattle and what was going on then, and what it was like to live in that city and be a merchant in that city at the time. And with that, I'm going to stop to share, because that is the taste of this presentation that I want to give to you. That was 20 minutes. I had it on my little timer of my watch. And I hope that that was interesting. I go on, of course, to show some more examples through photos and timelines and different things, that I'm happy to send you a copy of the whole PowerPoint. I put it together so I would have a sense of the presentation. And of course, it'll probably change 20 times before I give it, but hopefully it'll change for the better. And I appreciate your taking the time to listen to the beginning of my presentation and see, you know, what it might be like for people around the state. Thank you for the opportunity. Figure out how to stop the recording. Sorry.